Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the arcade system was released in '89 by Konami. It's such an iconic game. It's a great side-scrolling beat-em-up for either 4 players or 2 players, dependent on the cab that you could find back in the day. This is such an iconic game and is still really highly regarded. It's a great game. I thoroughly enjoy it. But when this converted to the home systems back in the day, yes, them home conversions, how well did it convert? Let's be honest, we couldn't afford arcade systems in our own home. We had to rely on the developers to create these masterpieces and bring them to us on our very often limited home hardware. Today we are looking at the following versions. We're going to look at the Commodore Amiga version against the Atari ST version, and then we're going to look at them classics, the 8-bit classic home computer systems of the day. Now these are the 3 systems I enjoy always looking at the most. You're talking about the Commodore 64, the Amstrad CPC, and finally the very small but graceful and humble Sinclair ZX Spectrum. Oh yes, a true beauty back in the day, but with many limitations. Anyway, we digress as always, and I'll be looking at one other system, which is the NES version, or the Famicom if you're from Japan. As always, let's go look at the arcade original first, so we can see what they had to reproduce. Released in 1989 by Konami, this is it. Let's hit the start button and we can then choose who we wish to be. Oh, I've already selected. Anyway, Konami also did The Simpsons, which was very sort of similar format. It's a side-scrolling game. You've got to go and rescue April O'Neil. Of course you have. 2 basic buttons. There's an attack button and a jump button. That's all there is. If you jump and then press attack, you get an extra sort of leaping kick. Various enemies, including him throwing nasty stars at me. As you can see, graphically, very bright. It was a good game. Sound was brilliant. Had speech as well, a nice little soundtrack, and nice little elements. I mean, him peeping around the corner and stuff. I love little things like that in games. I just think they're cool, you know. This arcade game was released in 2 formats. There was a 4-player arcade cab where 4 of you could play simultaneously, and then we had just a 2-player version where obviously only 2 of you could play, but again you could select any one of the Ninja Turtles that you fancied at that time. Oh dear, I lost my first life there. Okay, it's a good game, as I say, and I'm sure many of you have very fond memories of this, because as I say, it's still really quite an iconic game to this day and very highly regarded. Do not resist us. Oh dear, that's not very good. This is sort of your mini boss, and you might have me here. Keep out of that sort of zappy arm thing he's got, and just keep bashing him. We got there. Can hear her scream. Is that April? There she is, bless her, needing our help. More enemies. Right, and obviously you just keep working your way through the game until you do all the bosses. I don't know many of the bosses' names. Obviously I know the main dude, Shredder, but we're about to see our first boss, I believe. Here he comes. You're right, April, I gotcha. Who's coming out of here? Turtles. And there we go. I'm going to leave it there, so that's the first boss. So that's Turtles on the arcade. Let's go take a look at the Commodore Amiga version first.
Do not, I repeat, do not adjust your sound system. Yes, trust me, your speakers are working, you're hearing my voice. But why did the Commodore Amiga version of this game have 0 music? Honestly, what were they thinking? They gave you sound effects, which you can hear there. Now, you know, music aside, let's take a look at this game, this conversion here on the Commodore Amiga. We all have fond memories of the Amiga, of course we do. Myself in particular, I loved the games on it. But where it come to this conversion, the sound was very basic, which we've covered. No music, obviously you've got them sound effects there going on. Now graphically, it weren't too bad, don't get me wrong. You look at this, you can see you're playing the arcade version of the game, of course you can. But unfortunately, that's where the positives end. When you are physically playing this game, the controls just feel absolutely clunky. It doesn't feel as responsive as it should do, which detracts from the gameplay overall, really. Not just that, I felt like with the scrolling on this game, it could have been done a lot better. I mean, it should be a lot smoother, really, especially for the Amiga. So, unfortunately, not the greatest start on this. I mean, don't get me wrong, it looks good, but does it sound good? No. Does it play good? Could be better. Anyway, let's see how the ST does. Obviously, you can hear the music, which the Amiga just didn't have, so the Atari straight away is one up on it. But how does it play? How does it look, etc.? Well, as you can see there, we're getting into the game. Right, now overall, this is not a bad start here, right? It looks pretty good graphically, it plays well, and the scrolling was relatively smooth too, and had a real sort of decent feeling with the controls in comparison to the Amiga version. All this, right, with a half decent soundtrack to boot, made the ST conversion not bad at all. Obviously, right, it's not as good as the arcade, but come on, let's be honest, during these versus comparison videos, very rarely is it the conversion is better than the arcade, because let's be honest, we're looking at the arcade as the benchmark, aren't we? So let's just clear that up now. But overall, this was a really decent conversion. It played nicely, you can tell it's the arcade version, it looks great, it sounds great, and it just played better than the Amiga version. It wasn't as clunky, so well done the ST on this one. But let's have a look at the other versions. But before we get to them classic 8-bit machines, which I just love doing, we're going to go and take a look at the NES version, because that's out all on its own, because it's the only console version we're looking at today. Looks, feels and plays well, and you know you are playing the arcade game with this. The sound is decent too, right? And the only real letdown with this is the sprite flicker. You could see it there. The main character in particular, you just get that flicker there, and part of him sort of disappears occasionally, you know. But that aside, I tell you what, it's actually really good conversion. It's just a shame we've got no sort of Master System version to sort of compare it to, because I think that'd be quite a nice comparison. But unfortunately, it is what it is, guys. We've just got the NES version. So apart from that sprite flicker, and the other main drawback, a lack of enemies at any one time. It seemed to not have as many enemies as some of the other versions and the arcade that we'll be looking at today. But that aside, if I'd have bought this back in the day, would I have been disappointed? No, I would not. I'd have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it actually looks pretty decent and a very well done conversion. So well done on the NES there. A great console version, but as I say, such a shame there's nothing to compare it to, really. We have a soundtrack, people, yes indeed, but let's be honest, out of these 8-bit versions we're looking at today, if any system's going to give you a soundtrack, of course it would have been the Commodore 64 with its absolutely amazing SID chip that we've all come to remember and love so fondly. So a great start, Commodore, but here we go. Let's take a look at the game here itself. The character sprites are fairly small. The controls, again, they felt a bit clunky, and along with some questionable collision detection, it made for a bit of a bland version, to be honest. It was quite a boring game, and it just seemed to drag on and on and on. It wasn't like a fast-paced moving game, it just seemed to be very repetitive and just, don't get me wrong, it's following the same sort of principles as the other versions, but this one just seemed to take forever to sort of reach the end of the level. It was just, like I say, dragging on. So unfortunately, Commodore, great with the sound. The graphics weren't too bad, don't get me wrong, but some iffy gameplay, and yeah, dragging this one out you were. What were you thinking? Anyway, let's take a look at the Amstrad CPC next. Onto the Amstrad CPC version, and the soundtrack is missing on this version as well as it is with the Amiga and stuff. But you know what? It's to be expected. These were 8-bit machines, and let's be honest, quite often they would lack soundtracks and stuff in comparison, especially to the Commodore 64, which was just amazing at soundtracks and stuff. But anyway, the sound aside, the sound effects are very basics, but sound aside, graphically, right, this is pretty decent, and it looks really good, I thought. The colours are bright, and it makes great use of the palette there from the CPC colour palette. There's plenty of enemies on screen, it scrolls really well, and overall I just think this works, you know. It plays okay, it's decent smooth scrolling. So overall, a very good job on this Amstrad. It just played very nice. It wasn't as clunky as the others, and as I say, plenty of enemies on screen at any one time and stuff. So you know, that soundtrack though, will it knock it down a mark or two? We will see in my verdicts, which I'll give at the very end. And as we conclude here on the CPC, oh, there's only one classic 8-bit system left to go. The humble, but very respectable ZX Spectrum. But how well did it do with an arcade conversion of Turtles? Let's go take a look. And there we have it, the humble Spectrum teasing us with a bit of music, which then stops once the game starts. Talking of the sound, let's get that out of the way. It's your typical sort of crunchy sound effects that we come to expect maybe from the Spectrum, so nothing too dissimilar there. Now on the face of it, right, this monochrome specky effort, it don't look too bad really considering the restrictions of the Spectrum, but overall onto the game itself. Now for whatever reason, the gameplay in this is really difficult. And the difficulty with this levels and stuff, along with poor collision detection, ruin any chance of a decent game here. So the gameplay really does detract from the game itself. It just ruins it. Graphically, right, I felt this don't look too bad. And for the specky and the scrolling animation, I think it was actually done quite well. But then that said, I've always been a bit of a fan of the sort of monochrome graphics of the Spectrum anyway. I've just never really minded it. And by using this effect like this, it obviously stops the colour clash that is synonymous with the Spectrum. But unfortunately, the poor gameplay for this is the real standout effort, and it's just not good enough, I'm afraid. So unfortunately, it's not the best. But you know what? I did like the look of it, and the scrolling was very smooth indeed. Let's get my verdicts.
There we have it. The Ninja Turtles, or Hero Turtles, whichever you prefer. I'm just going to call them either, I don't know, either or. But either way, what did you think of those versions? And firstly, before we get into my verdicts and which ones I think were the best, memories. If you guys remember playing this back in the day, especially on any of them home systems that I showed, do drop in the comments you're A, really pleased with them, or B, you were so disappointed, etc. I just love hearing our little stories and ditties from back in them days. Mate, yeah, we had to put up with some rough old games, didn't we? Now, before we get into my verdicts, let me point something out. In the past, people quite often put a comment, well, the arcade version was the best. Look, whenever I do a versus video, the arcade version is always the best, because that's the benchmark, that's what you're going off. Everything else is just, you know, because they're trying to be as comparable to the arcade version as possible. So obviously, the arcade version is the best. First off, my verdict for the 16-bit systems, and then we'll do them 8-bits, but before we get to it, you know what? I'm going to need a beer, guys. Nice drop of Singer Lager. I've been having a good few of these lately. I'm quite into these at the moment, these Singer Lagers. Yeah, they're very, very tasty indeed. Oh dear, nearly spilt over there, look. Anyway, professional pour there. Right, anyway, 16-bit verdict first. Prop my beard out. Okay, so, in second position, there's obviously only two. It's the Commodore Amiga versus the ST. And in second position, I'm giving it to the Commodore Amiga. Now, quite often in these verses, when these two 16-bit computers meet, the Commodore Amiga quite often takes it, but not on this occasion. So obviously the Atari ST is the worthy winner of this one. But why? What makes it better, in my mind, than the Amiga version? Well, firstly, they actually applied a soundtrack to the ST version, which was pretty cool, you know. The Amiga, for whatever reason is beyond me, they just didn't bother. We all know that the Amiga's more than capable of producing that sort of music. Of course it is. But why not add it to both systems? Anyway, this music thing is something we'll be repeating very soon with the 8-bits, I'm sure. But equally, graphically, they both look pretty good. They both look pretty sound. They look pretty on it, you know. But then when you start playing, right, the ST version for me was just that bit smoother. It played better. It wasn't as clunky as the Amiga version. So for me, the ST takes it. And like I say, that doesn't always happen. So well done, ST. A worthy winner this time round, oh yes. The 8-bit systems. Now, I always really enjoy looking at the 8-bit systems. Now, also bear in mind, back in the day, many of us watching this will know, but there may be some viewers that aren't aware that are a different age to us, different generation. But the computer systems were obviously quite basic, the 8-bits, you know. But they could produce some absolutely amazing things at times for the limitations of them. They really, really could, as we've evidenced in the past in some of these Versus videos. But we come to this game in question, the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, and how it performs on them 8-bits. In third position, I'm giving it to the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, but stop there. Only just. Between second and third was really, really close. Now the Specky version, them monochrome graphics, right? I was always a fan of the Specky's monochrome graphics anyway, okay? I didn't think they were bad. I liked them. I loved the monochrome graphics because it also used to reduce the colour clash on games and things. And I think they were really well drawn, and I think the animation and smoothness was pretty good for the limitations of the Specky. But unfortunately, that's where it ends. The gameplay and the collision and everything else was just so bad. It just made the game pretty much unplayable, and you were like, oh, I've had enough of this. I'm done with it. You were like that, you know. Which brings us into second position. And in second position, it goes to the Commodore 64. Now, of course, the Commodore gave us a bit of music, a soundtrack, which is great. But the Commodore 64 is good at that anyway. With that SID chip we've all come to know and love so well. I mean, who remembers the ocean loading music? Oh, that was just sublime, wasn't it? That was awesome. Anyway, we're digressing here. So, the positive was the Commodore 64 did give us a tune. But the character sprites are really small. And there was a lack of enemies on the screen at any one sort of time. And you know what? The game just dragged on and harassed on. It was, honestly, it wasn't pleasant. It was just, this is a chore, mate. This is a chore. So obviously the winner is the Amstrad CPC. Now, more often than not in these Versus videos, especially with the 8-bits, the Commodore quite often comes in and takes it. But you know what? Graphically, for the limitations of the 8-bit systems, the Amstrad did the graphics on this so well. The colours, the brightness, it just looked really well done. I mean, aside from that, don't get me wrong, there was no soundtrack. But in terms of playability, it was a really well done conversion. And well done, Amstrad CPC. You most definitely deserve the award for the 8-bits there. A very Worthy winner indeed. Well done, Amstrad CPC. Oh, very well done, actually. It was. Great conversion. Very good. Very impressed I was. That colour palette. Yeah, it was good. It was good. Anyway, cheers. Finally, there was the NES, but I had no other systems to really put it up against in terms of conversions. And in terms of everything, it was probably the best conversion that we'd seen out of the 8 bits to 16 bits. The NES really did pull it out of the bag. It was a great game. It had some problems, of course it did. I mean, that sprite flicker being the main one, sort of more like that, wasn't it? Sort of the flicker was sort of going through the characters. But that aside, if you'd have bought that back in the day, you wouldn't have been disappointed. You were getting the game that was the arcade game. You knew you were playing it. So all in all, that was a really pretty good conversion as well. Just a shame that there wasn't a version of this on sort of the Master System, because they could have gone head to head then, you know, the NES and the Master System, seeing how they would have both done on this. But the NES version was really well done indeed, actually. So anyway, that's it from me. That is my verdict. So let me have in the comments future versus videos you would like to see, your memories. Do you agree? Do you disagree with my verdicts? If you disagree, feel free to put in the comments why I'm wrong. And as I say, just be pleasant and nice about it, because we are all grown-ups here. Anyway, cheers guys, thanks for watching, do all that good stuff you do, and I'll see you all on the next one. And remember, comments, I love reading them. Cheers guys, see you on the next one. Laters. Hard work this.